Don't sell your house, swap it. Trading houses. Jody Becker has the details on this one. 728, Handle here. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk radio. Let's check in with Gary Hoffman with the latest.
There is Bill Handel.
And back we are at 733 with a Jody Becker story of house swapping. And that seems, Jody, almost impossible with the hurdles you have to overcome. Valuation and that just seems... I got to tell you, how do you do that?
Well, that's what we're going to tell you, because in some ways it is tricky, but not as hard as you probably think it is.
All right. So tell me, if I want to swap my house, if I want to swap the Persian Palace, okay, who do I talk to and how do I do it?
Not Pepino. He can't do it. He won't afford it. Well, the concept is fairly simple, but because you're going online, there's just more out there now. It's easier to do now than before the internet was around. And basically what house swapping is an equity for equity exchange. So you take the equity in the property you own and you swap it for equity in another property. Now, you have to balance this out. So if the Persian Palace is worth $17 million, you're not going to trade it for a condo in Compton. Or if you do, you have to balance it out so people come out even. And you do that with cash. You can do it with new financing, deeds of trust, all this kind of stuff. And that's where you might want to get some professional help in if you need some help with the technicalities. You can do it yourself, but it's a lot of paperwork.
So it's not just swapping a house of equal value for a house of equal value.
No, because that's nearly impossible to do, especially a lot of these happen state to state. Some are even going international for vacation homes or for your second property here for a vacation home somewhere else. So no, they don't have to equal out. Plus, a $500,000 house here is not the same as a $500,000 house in Topeka, Kansas.
Right. Actually, $500,000 buys you all of Topeka, Kansas.
Probably. So I had to figure out more about this and how to do this. So I talked to a guy named David Desiker. He's from San Clemente. He's a real estate exchange broker. Now, these guys have special training in how to do this, so you don't necessarily want to go just to a regular broker. They may not help you. You need some special training on to know how to do this. We'll explain more about that later. But the first thing I wanted to figure out is, why do people swap? Because what I'm hearing is that it's becoming more popular than it has been for a very long time. And the main reason, he says, is preservation of equity. The foreclosure market is sucking everything up. The sellers are basically giving away equity because the market is like it is, which you've been talking about for months. And so the trades allow you to hang on to what you've got because whoever you're trading with wants to hang on to their equity too. So Desiker says it's basically a lot of benefits to doing this.
You're able to get what you want in an area that you want, instead of attempting to fire sale your property at foreclosure prices and then go ahead and try to buy something in that other area at a foreclosure price. Because what might happen is you may not have any equity to use to buy the other property.
So basically, this started out to be used a lot in job transfers. It also was very popular and still is for investment properties, apartment buildings, commercial, industrial stuff. But now he says it's really transitioning toward residential again because the housing market hasn't been like this for decades.
There's currently a lot of activity out there in the exchange market that hasn't been around for quite some time because of the easy access to money.
Jody, when you're swapping houses, is the equity predicated on today's values, the lower values, or is it sort of ignoring the fact that the market has tanked completely and the ridiculously low values don't really play into this?
Well, you can do a little bit of both. If you've just taken out, let's say in the last few years, you thought the market was bottoming out within the last year, so you bought a property, you can still trade that. But the point in doing this, as you mentioned, is to preserve your equity in your property. So you try to negotiate from that starting point. Now, again, it's all the deal between you and this other swapper, so it's what you work out as well. There's some negotiations to be done. I'm not aware of whether or not you need to get your property reassessed before you would do this. That's probably something a broker could ask. But what we're hearing is, again, because of the kind of market we are in now, this is becoming more popular. The last time so many residential properties were being swapped. Desiker says was in the early 90s when the market was down then too, you'll remember. And people are just kind of rediscovering that the swapping is even out there and that their sites, Desiker has a personal listing on GoSwap.org. There are at least a half a dozen of them that are offering basically a way to list your property. You can put a picture up there. You can put a whole photo gallery up there. You kind of describe your property. And then you can also describe what you're looking for. Or if you'd rather, you can just go search and say you want to move to Phoenix. You go search all the properties that are available in Phoenix. And then he says it's really a time to consider seriously swapping again because of the market.
The only ones that are selling are the foreclosed properties. People out there with cash are going to foreclosures. They're not even messing around with what's on the market.
Now, there are some problems with this. Now, most people don't understand how to do this on their own. And the sites like GoSwap.org, Desiker says, need better forms. They need better education so people don't get frustrated. He says that's the main stalling point. People get a few steps in and find a property they want to swap with, and they get confused, so then it doesn't go anywhere, or it takes a really long time to do the research and figure out how to do this legally, and then you kind of just consider it a wash. So he says that's the first problem. He says the second problem is, again, because loans were so easy to get and brokers didn't have to be exceptionally well trained for the last several years, brokers specifically have not been trained in how to do these types of exchanges.
With all the free money for the last few years, the brokers haven't even been trained on how to put these transactions together. So even if you go to your local broker, chances are he's not going to know how to put this together.
But if you go to one, and we're going to have resources on the website on how to find a legit broker, if you go to one that does know how to do this, you can cut your fees in half or more.
Well, sure, because if you sell your house, you're paying broker's fees. You buy another property, you're paying broker's fees, or someone is paying broker's fees. Mm-hmm. And that alone is going to save you a pile of money.
And you can even save more than that, because check this out. He says if you're willing to, let's say, go online and find somebody to swap with, or they even do 4 or 5 or 6 leg swaps because, you know, maybe you don't want to move to Phoenix, but somebody else does. So then you trade with Hawaii and somebody else goes to Phoenix and somebody comes to LA. You can have multiple leg transfers. That's what they call them. If you do something like that, you have one broker handle it for everybody. You can split the fee. Or if you're willing to do more of the legwork, you can negotiate a flat fee of, let's say, $500 just for this broker to fill out the final paperwork versus an actual percentage.
It won't be $500
of your price.
No broker
No,
is
he
right.
said
Really?
He said depending on how much work you're willing to do yourself, most brokers will negotiate. And again,
no, I
you want to
believe
set
that.
all this up beforehand. And again, we have resources on the handle page of KFIAM640.com, but he said it can be anywhere from $500 to a few thousand.
Yeah, well, I can certainly see the few thousand. But so this is mainly for people that want to move to a specific area. Mm-hmm. This is a residential. And by the way, the 1031 exchanges have been going on forever.
Right.
In the area of commercial, that's an integral part of commercial real estate. That the IRS lets you do where there's no tax ramifications at all, the 1031 exchange.
And the group of brokers that handles what you're just talking about, the National Association of Exchange Counselors, they've got a website, which we've linked to off of yours, that shows if these brokers have a little seal of approval, basically, that they've taken special training and know how to do this, which means they can also handle residential. So if you want to go on the site and do the research yourself, then you can bring a pro in to finish the deal for you, and that speeds things along, basically.
Is there any level of this is where it's being done? More expensive houses, medium houses, or is it across the board?
It's across the board, but there are some particular markets that are more popular right now than others. And tell me if you find this interesting at all. The top 2 locations, he says, in the U.S. that are most popular, any wild guesses? Florida and California. Any wild guesses why? Those 2 states, and Nevada as well, are tops for foreclosure market crisis problems.
Oh, so more people are apt to do this.
Because you can't get anybody to buy your property without you losing your tushy in the sale,
yeah.
So then you trade with somebody instead.
That makes sense. So
yeah, they're becoming really popular.
Any specific city in California, or is it across the state?
No, so far it's statewide, and he says right now he's working on one that's a 3-way trade between Prescott, Arizona, Arizona, a lot in Maui, and a property that he actually has in Carlsbad.
Wow.
And they're all different prices, $405, $475, and $995. And they're going to work out the equity.
So money does change hands.
Yeah. Well, again, if you're coming, you can do it a bunch of different ways. You can do it so that cash actually does. You can do deeds of trust. You can do financing and take out a new loan. But then the equity is the main thing that swaps between all three. And then if somebody else, if one side owes the other another $400,000 in addition because they're getting a nicer deal or a nicer home, you work the rest of that out. So you swap first and then work out what's ever left so everybody ends up even.
Why anybody would move to Florida is beyond my understanding. Where do you move to? Humid City, Florida?
Well, somebody's going to say the same thing about smoggy LA, Bill. You do it because you're relocating for a job.
Or you want a state full of my mother in Florida.
Nahama is a draw.
That said, a state full of yentas, and that's where you want to move. How quickly is this growing?
You know what? He says that it was popular again, like 93, 94, the last time the market had really tanked. And just now it's starting to take off again because people are remembering this exists. What it's taken is the loans to kind of dry up. And again, the selling to switch. And now the buyers, when they're going to buy, and these first-time buyers that are just starting to hit the market again, are not going for the properties like the Persian Palace if you wanted to move because you're not in foreclosure.